If you want to visualize your GA4 data in Looker Studio, the first thing you'll need to do is create a Google Analytics data source. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to do that step by step. Be sure to stay tuned to the end because I'll also walk you through how to build a basic e-commerce dashboard for your GA4 data. To get started, we'll log into our Looker Studio account. And if you don't have one yet, you can create one free at datastudio.google.com. And once we're in here, we'll go to this create button up here, and then we'll select data source. And so in this case, a data source can be anything from a Google Sheet to a data warehouse, but all this is doing is supplying the information that our dashboard will report on. And in this case, we'll be using a native Google Analytics connector because this will allow us to sync directly to your GA4 account and basically export data directly from there. So we'll select the Google Analytics option right here. And here you can choose whichever account, any accounts that you have access to will show up here. So I'll just choose one of my sandbox accounts and then I'll select this property. So before we click connect, I'm also going to give a name to my data source just so I can reference it if I have more than one. And so in this case, I'll just name it Resandbox GA4 and then I'll click connect. And you'll see here that Google gives us a predefined list of dimensions and metrics that they've built into the dashboard so that we can report on geographic attributes, device attributes, traffic sources, audiences, and we can also pair that with users, sessions, and e-commerce activity pretty easily. So I'll click the logo to take us back to the main screen, and then we'll create again, and this time we'll create a report. And in this case, it'll prompt us to create a data source again. And I'm just going to click My Data Sources and click the sandbox data source that we just created. And then I'll add that to the report. And so now it'll just give us this predefined table right here from our data source. At this point, the blank canvas might be kind of intimidating to look at. And so I'm going to give you a framework for how we can start thinking of how we want to arrange our dashboard here. And so the first step is to consider what do we want to get out of this page. And in this case, for creating a basic dashboard for e-commerce, we might ask a question like, how's our sales performance doing? We'll start off with a couple of basic questions like that. The second step is going to be to wireframe our dashboard so that we don't have this intimidating blank canvas in front of us, and so that we have a couple of ways to arrange our data. So the first thing that I'm going to do is use this shape tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle up here. And so in this first row, what we want to do as we start at the top of the dashboard is portray some of the most important information up here first, and then add more detail as we go further down the page. So in this top section, I'm going to plan on using some scorecards to highlight some of our most important metrics, and then as we go further below, we can go in deeper detail. And so I can already see here, we're already bleeding off the page. So I'm gonna just make this a little bit larger by going to page and then current page settings. And then here under style, I can adjust the height of the page. So right now it says it's at 900. Let's just say 1250 for now. And I'll drag these down a bit and make these a bit larger so that we can fill in the rest of the page. And now we can get started adding some data here. Next, I'm going to go to this add chart option and I'm going to select a scorecard. So we'll use this right here and I'll drag this one down and let's make this large enough to fit the height of this rectangle area. Not all the way, but just so that it takes up a reasonable amount of space. And we're going to display maybe 5 or 6 of the most important metrics that we care about here for evaluating our total e-commerce traffic and sales. But before we do that, we're going to adjust this formatting so that once we copy this, it's going to have a nice uniform look across the board here. So to do that, we'll go to style. And the first thing that I'm going to do is center all of our metric names and comparisons. And then next, I'm going to change the background to white so that it stands out against this gray square. And then I'm also going to look under padding right here. And what the padding will do is basically just adjust the height of where this is displayed. So for this top height, I'm just going to set this for now to be the same as our left and right padding so that it's a little more centered. So I'm going to set that at 24 pixels for now. One more thing that we can do if we just want to add a little bit more flair to this scorecard, what we can also do is add a sparkline. And so what this will do is basically just help us get a little bit more information from our view count in this case. And basically what it'll do is just show what this number looks like over time. In this case, what we'll do is we'll also add a date range control. so that one, we can control the date range of the dashboard more easily. It'll give you a date picker right here. And I'm also going to set this date range to, let's just say year to date. And so there we can already start seeing what the views look like over time. And so then I'm going to drag this right there, and we can start copying this, and we'll arrange these across this top bar right here. So now that we have all of our metrics right here, let's just drag these back to the center, and we can update these to some more interesting data. So let's say instead of views, we're actually more interested in sessions. So what we'll do is we'll just select the scorecard, and then right here where it says metric, we'll click on this blue pill. And instead of views, we'll just say sessions. And then we can do the same for the Sparkline chart right here. And for the remaining two, we may also want to know what is our average order value and what is our conversion rate, so that we can really understand, if we want to grow our store, what should we focus on? Should we focus on increasing our average order value? Do we need to improve our conversion rate? Or do we just need more traffic? Which of those areas has the most leverage to help us grow our business? So here we'll use average purchase revenue. What they really mean by that is average order value. And for the last one, they're not going to give us the purchase conversion rate by default, but what we can do is create that metric here in Looker Studio. And so what we'll do is we'll click on the blue metric pill, and then we'll click create field. And so this is going to let us enter a custom formula so that we can essentially report on whatever metric we want to right here. And so what we'll do is we will take e-commerce purchases and divide that by sessions, since really any visit is an opportunity for someone to buy. And then we will change the type to a %, so we see that as a percentage. And then we will type in conversion rate right here, and then we'll apply. And our total purchases divided by our total sessions is going to be our purchase conversion rate. And so in this case, my figure for conversion rate is going to look extremely exaggerated. No one's going to have a 117% conversion rate for a growing e-com store. In this case, because it's just me doing test purchases on my demo site all day, that's why I have such a high conversion rate. So now that we have some of our basic data right here, let's also give ourselves a more interesting comparison. So I'll set the default range to this quarter to date. And let's say that we also want to activate some comparisons right here. Even with all of these different scorecards selected, we can select a comparison date range. And in this case, let's just say previous period. So we'll essentially be comparing Q4 so far to Q3. So we'll say previous period, but you can also do previous year or use advanced to do a custom comparison. And then we'll say previous period, and so it'll give me all these different percentage changes in there as well. So next, maybe we want to dig into how our sessions or purchases are trending by traffic source. So I'm just going to make things easy on myself and copy one of these existing Sparklines, and it won't be what we ultimately use, but it's not a bad starting point. So now that I've copied that there, I'm going to go up to this chart menu up here and click the down arrow to open up the different types of chart options that we have. And so there's a couple different ways that we can go here. I do think that a stacked area chart is a nice way to visualize how different types of traffic sources lead to purchases over time, but you can also use a stacked column chart for that. That's also a nice solution. And so for our breakdown dimension here, if our question is which traffic sources are bringing us purchases over time, then we'll say date should be our dimension right here so that we can see how that's happening over time. And for our breakdown dimension, we can select something like default channel grouping, which is basically just the high-level channels bringing traffic to your site. And in this case, we can see sessions from organic search, direct, and unassigned. And we can change our metric to, let's just say we want to see purchase revenue instead of just purchases. And so there we can see our purchases right there. And if we want to make this chart stand out a little bit more, we can also go to the style pane while having this chart selected and scroll down. And right here under background and border, we can change this gray background to white so that it's a little bit more noticeable. And if we want to, we can also go ahead and copy this chart and we can fill in this space over here with some more data. And so I'll drag this in so that it fits a bit more easily. And at this point, we might ask ourselves, which of these traffic sources is the most prominent for this date range overall? Maybe we want a simpler visualization for that. So we could select this donut chart option, and instead of our dimension being date, in this case, we could say, let's just focus on that default channel grouping. And in this case, we'll see our summary essentially of our total purchase revenue by default channel grouping for this date range. Before we go on, maybe we want to make that a little bit clearer. So what we can do is drag our charts down a bit, and we can add a title heading right here. So I'll click this text option right here and then drag that there. And then we can say purchase revenue by default channel grouping quarter to date, just so that we have a little bit more clarity on what data is being portrayed here. And what we can do is, let's just say we want to make this the more prominent portion. So I'll just make my font size a little bit bigger. That should be good. And we can also make that bold if we want to. And we can still make this a little bit bigger as well. And then we'll just make sure that all of this information right here is nice and centered. And there we go. So last, we can also get even more detailed in this last section. And before we do, I'm just going to resize my page a bit one more time since it's gotten a bit longer. And what we can do next, really actually what we can do to make this even easier on ourselves is just delete that last rectangular area, and then we'll just use this as our new starting point. And so what we can say down here is maybe we want to continue looking at some of the same data, but even more detailed. And I'm just going to rearrange these charts right here purely for aesthetic reasons, just to add a little bit of variety right here. And so what we'll do here is convert this chart into a table so that we can see in detail what our users and sessions and purchases look like by each channel. So I'm going to go to this chart tab again, and let's say we want to do a table with heat map. And so right here, we won't want date in this case. That adds a little bit too much information. So we'll remove that. And let's just say we want to add in our sessions purchase revenue, and we may even want to see our average purchase revenue here and our purchase conversion rate. And so to do that, I'm just going to create the field for that again. And that's one thing to keep in mind when you're building these formulas in here, is that Data Studio tends to be very sensitive to the names of the different dimensions and metrics that you're using. So be sure to type that dimension or metric exactly as it's listed in the data source. Otherwise, it may not show up here. So before we close that out, we'll just set this to a %, and then we'll name this conversion rate, and then we'll apply. All right. So now that we have our table set up here, one thing that we can do is that this doesn't look very good. So to quickly make this a bit more even, we can right click on it, resize these columns, and set it to fit to data. And something else that I like to do in these situations, I'm going to rename this to average order value for short, and resize again, just because I think that looks better. And we can also do this too for formatting. I personally don't like how null is displayed here, something that always drives me crazy. So I'm going to go to style right here. And in this case, you can format how your missing data is shown. So instead of saying show null, I'm just going to show a dash. I think that looks much cleaner, and it doesn't look broken if null or no data is shown. I personally don't like those options. You can also just have it be blank. Personally, I think that the dash is the cleanest, just because it's a way of showing that there's no data that needs to be represented there without looking like it's broken. And then last, we'll just get rid of this portion so that the table has a little bit more room here. And what you can also do is you can add a couple of other dimensions here if you want to go deeper than the channel level. So if we wanted to, let's say that we also wanted to look at, let's just say the medium, for example. So we can say session medium. And in this case, we'll resize these again. It'll show your medium right here. And if you don't want that to be displayed in the same table, you can also use this drill down option, and that'll give you the ability to use these up and down arrows on your table. So if you want to, you can say, I just want to see my mediums for organic search, for example. And then you'll just see that listed there. And you can do that either for a specific item in your table or just for the table as a whole. So with all that being said, this table, or this this dashboard still looks a bit ugly. And so something that we can do just to make the formatting or the appearance of it a little bit more interesting is that we can change these rectangles from gray backgrounds to anything of your choice. And in this case, we can do a gradient background. First, I'll select the rectangles and we'll add a border shadow just because that gives a little bit more visual weight to them. And next, click the background paint can right here and then click gradient. And in this case, I'm going to use a 3-color gradient that's loosely inspired by Shopify's color palette. So for the first one, I'm going to click on the first square right here and set that one to be white. And for the second one, we will use a green color. So something like this light green, something like that. And then for the third one, we will use a light blue color. And so I'm going to drag this down here and let's just say that that is the color. And then we can also change the angle of our gradient too. So I think I'd rather do something like this 45-degree angle, and then we'll click done. And so there you have it. We can also update these other individual chart pieces to fit this theme a little bit more nicely. So if you're interested in a separate video just on Data Studio formatting, then let me know in the comments. And if you found this useful, then please like and subscribe. There are other videos on my channel that you can watch that are specific to GA4. And if you want to see more Looker Studio content, then definitely let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.